Hi guys, welcome back to this Great Academy lecture on business. Today what we're doing is we're going to have a look at section 2. And if you can remember from our overview, section 2 we're going to look through our units 1 to unit 7. Now this isn't supposed to teach you the syllabus. This is just to help revise what you have done in class. So we won't be going through every topic in in-depth detail, but you should use it as is a revision tool. So I use this method with my sixth-years. Once we finish the course, once they've done their pre's, we've done some practice on our questions, and then I give them this as a tool for them to revise, a little checklist for them to go down through it and see what they do know and what they don't know, where they need to place their focus, okay, and what they have already covered and what they have done. So it's a really, really good tool for you to use. I would also recommend, and it's a really, really important piece of information. I would really recommend not trying to gather too much information. Because if you gather information from loads of different sources, what you'll find is you'll feel very overwhelmed. If you have the information, the notes that you've gotten in class from your book or your teacher, and if you use this notes that I've given you here, that will be enough for you. Okay, you don't need to continue to gather loads and loads of notes and revision. All you find is you'll be kind of swamped with loads and loads of notes and you won't even know where to start. So once you have done your two, you covered your syllabus in class, I would then use this as a revision tool for yourself. So we're going to start on unit 1. I'm going to go through unit by unit. Now, I possibly will put unit 2 and 3 together because unit 2 is quite small. So we're going to start with unit 1 today, and we're going to have a look down through this. So what I said here about unit 1, case studies are often used in long questions. Always answer the question and always refer to the case study. Now, we have mentioned this previously as well when we talked about our long questions and that. So always, always, always make sure that if there is a case study there, make sure you relate back to that case study. So it often comes up, might be in, consumer law. So it might give you an example of somebody's bought a phone, or it might mention, Samsung Galaxy phone has increased or had a problem. What is the consumer's rights? So you have to always relate it back to the case study there and that. It comes up as a short question and it will be your question 1. So question 1 will all be in relation to unit 1. Whatever features on question 1, that's what will come up from unit 1. And what's also important to remember here is that it's also going to feature as our new question 4. So last year was the first year that this new question 4 has been introduced, and all of the questions were based on unit 1. So that's a really important information to take in as well. So the first topic that we're looking at here, and I don't do this in chapters because all of you will have different books and there'll be different chapters and top and headings and so on. So this is the first thing that we're going to look at is people in business. Now this features almost every year. Whether it's as a short question or a long question, something comes up on people in business. So make sure that you know this very well. The first topic we have there is stakeholders in the business. I've said be able to define each one and be able to give examples. So what are our stakeholders in the business? So your employers, your employees, your investors, your suppliers. Okay, so make sure you know all of them. Make sure you can give a definition of each one. And most importantly there, be able to give an example. Next topic we have is interest groups. Now this features regularly, and I've given you some notes on this, so just look in the notes section there on that. Your keywords is what you need to learn there in your interest groups. A group of people come together with a common goal. They lobby the politicians. They have more power. They use boycotts. So they're all your keywords that we have there in terms of interest groups. So I'll always say this, and I go back over it over and over again. Stop trying to learn big chunks of information. Pick out what your keywords are, learn your keywords, and then make a sentence out of that. Okay, over and over again. It's not an English exam. So once you put those into your sentence, the minute your corrector sees those keywords, they'll underline them and you'll pick your marks up. Now, stakeholders are often asked in combination with another topic. So be confident in your understanding so you can relate to other topics. So this may come up, for example, in the chapter on social responsibilities. So it might be, what are the social responsibilities business has to its stakeholders? So you have to know your stakeholders and then be able to relate it to your social responsibilities. So it comes up very much in a lot of different chapters in how it relates to other topics. So make sure that you have a good understanding and you know that. Our possible questions that we have on this is relationship. And we can see here that they really do like to ask questions on relationship. as I said, it does feature nearly every year as either a long question or a short question. So we see it came up in 2021, it came up in 2020, 2019. So make sure you have a very, very good understanding. And again, it's like one of those topics that you find quite easy. And as a result, you don't spend that much time on it. But when it would come to answering an actual question, you may find this quite difficult. So make sure that you've practiced these answers and you know how to answer them properly. If the word relationship comes up, you must mention either a win-win situation or a win-lose situation. The stakeholders will have similar aims and objectives or different aims and objectives. So make sure you can talk about the relationship. So if you see the word relationship, you have to mention those keywords. Okay, that's what your examiner will be looking for. So, and then the role in the business. Okay, what would the employer's role be in the business? What would the employee's role be in the business? The supplier's role in the business. Okay, so they're the type of questions that come up. But when stakeholders come up on its own, it's generally in terms of relationships. Okay, so make sure that you can give a relationship, a cooperative and a competitive relationship between the different stakeholders in the business. Now, sometimes you might be lucky and they might give you they might ask you a certain two stakeholders. They might say, choose any two stakeholders that you would like. But sometimes then they might give you a specific one. So they might say an investor and an entrepreneur. Okay, give an example of a relationship between them. So you would have to mention being competitive and cooperative, that it's always changing. Okay, so that's our first section there in terms of stakeholders in the business. The next one that we're going to look at is contract law, and this likes to come up quite a bit too. So in terms of contract law, again, go down through these, tick them to make sure that you know each one of them and you can answer each one that we have here. So define a contract, and then this likes to come up quite a lot, is the elements of a valid contract. Now, I have a point here that says, be careful if a 20-mark question, and I've said give 5 points. Now, when you're going through the long question presentation that I've given, I will have put in there that if it's a 20-mark question, the general rule of thumb is you give 4 points. Now, this came up in 2006, a long time ago, but it came up as a 20-mark question. The majority of students only gave 4 points, and the maximum that they got then was 16 out of 20. Okay, so if something like explain the elements of a valid contract comes up, I will be saying give 5 points. It was marked 2 plus 2. So you give your subheading, you give your explanation. Now, I would also advise that in terms of giving your explanation, and a lot of the elements, there might not be a lot for you to pick up your +2. So give an example and that will help you expand your point. Okay, so be careful with that one if it does come up. It's quite an easy question to go up at a higher level. Just explain the elements of a valid contract. So if that is the case, give 5 points and it'll be marked 2 plus 2. So the next one then is an invitation to treat, tends to come up as a short question. Make sure that you can define what an invitation to treat is. So you can give your example like a price tag isn't a binding offer. Okay, so a price tag is only, for you to initiate you making an offer. All right. Next one then we have here is termination of a contract. Make sure you can give examples. Examples help you expand your point, and you may also be asked to illustrate that. So what I have given here is, you can see I've given the initials of the subheading, PAFB. So how is a termination of a contract? So that might help you learn it. Performance, agreement, frustration, breach. Okay, how do I know and how does it help me remember the difference between a termination and remedies? Students tend to get mixed up between the two of them. So PAFB. Okay, and I'd often say to students, make a rhyme maybe out of the subheadings, and that may help you learn it a little bit easier. Okay, so that's our termination of contract. Be able to know our subheadings, be able to give examples, and be able to expand on those. Remedies for breach of contract. Okay, do you know your remedies? I've given you a sample answer on this. So look to the section on sample answers. I have them broken up into different units, and you'll find it there in unit 1. Okay, and be able to give examples and RDS. Okay, so try and put it together that that you rescind damages specific performance. Okay, so make sure that you learn your subheadings, make a little rhyme to help you learn those. So that's generally what will feature in terms of your contract law. So as I said, go down through each one of them, close the book, take it off. Can I define what a contract is? Can I give what the elements of a valid contract are? My invitation to treat, can I explain that and can I give an example of that, and so on. Okay, so it's a really effective tool, because if you can do all of those, then that's this section covered, and you know this section then. Are possible questions then on it? So we can see here that it comes up. Now, I haven't kind of put up when it's come, a lot of the time I might not put up when it comes in as a short question. This is when it all has featured as a long question and also in your ABQs. So it comes up quite a bit. Elements of a valid contract we can see have come up. Methods of termination. So they like to kind of give your methods of termination or a breach of contract. That they tend to like to bring that up, and particularly in a short question also, because they can give you two of them for 10 marks in your short questions. Or it might be kind of come up, they might fill in the blanks and you might need to fill in the right word there in it. So we can see that has come up: agreement, legality of form, consideration. Okay. We then have breach, frustration, or agreement. So they might pick different kind of topics from the contract section and ask you to explain those. Specific performance. Okay. And be able to give an example there on that. Elements of a valid contract. So if that came up, elements of a valid contract, would be a very, very nice, easy question for you to answer. But just make sure you give your 5 points on it. Okay. So that's our section there on our people in business and our contract law. Now we're going to move on to our consumer conflict. So at any of the stages that we're going along, guys, pause the video, rewind it, take down some notes if need be, because I know I probably moved through it quite quickly. So just pause it, go back over, take some notes, write down some information that you've picked up from it, and then start up again. So we're looking now at consumer conflict. Okay, so I'm kind of giving you little points of stuff that haven't come up in quite a while. So the Consumer Information Act 2007 hasn't come up. So since it's changed the Consumer Information Act, this hasn't featured as a long question. So I would definitely be saying to my 6 years this year, I would be saying, make sure you know the Consumer Information Act. It hasn't featured. It has. What always has been coming up in the past is our Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act. So I will be saying, know this topic and know it quite well. Okay, so let's have a look down through the topics then that we need to look at here: consumer conflict. First one that we have is non-legislative methods. So how can you solve it? If you have a problem with a business, you've bought a product or a service, you're not happy, how do you solve this non-legislatively? Okay, so we have the Consumer Association of Ireland. So this CAI, again, that's another abbreviation for you. Okay, Consumer Association of Ireland. And again, be able to it might come up as a 10-mark question. I can see that featuring as a 20-mark, maybe a 10-mark question. What are the functions? What's the purpose of the CAI? Okay, it's an interest group for consumers, gives expert advice, lobby the government, helps make consumers make good buying choices. They publish their magazine, so on. Okay, so be able to give, at least if you're testing yourself on that, make sure you can give yourself a 10-mark there on that. Okay. So there, our legislative method would be, we might seek information from the Consumer Association of Ireland. Remember, our non-legislative would we go and speak, to the shop manager, maybe, explain a problem and try and sort it out without having to resort to any legislative methods. Okay. Now, the legislative methods we have our two acts: the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act 1980 and the Consumer Protection Act 2007. So I have given you notes on the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, and I've given you a sample answer then on the Consumer Protection Act. So make sure that you can look at, both of those and have a look at the notes and the sample answers. As I said, the Consumer Protection Act hasn't featured, okay, in some time. So make sure that you can answer that. And I've laid it out quite well in your sample answer. The Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act comes up regularly. Okay, it comes up as a short question. 2018, it came up as a short question. You have to fill in the blanks, and it comes up quite a lot as a long question. So make sure you know that. And one other point on that one is make sure you know the dates. So it's the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act 1980. Depending on where they're marking or the marking scheme, if you don't put in your 1980 or your 2007, they won't give you marks. So say, for example, the question, name the act that protects the consumer in this situation. If you just say the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, you don't give the year, depending on what way they're going to mark it, you possibly will not pick up those 2 marks if it was 2 that they've allocated to that. Okay, so be very mindful of that you know the acts, but you also know the dates. Now, this is what has come up previously, and it has actually, caught a lot of students out. It's what I have here is a reverse question. So what the question would be is, when would a retailer be in breach of the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act? So what students typically would have put down there was goods are of merchantable quality, they must be fit for the purpose. If you put down goods must be of merchantable quality, well, then they're not in breach of the Act. So the reverse question would be, your answer there will be when goods are not of merchantable quality. when goods are not fit for the purpose. Okay, so that's what I mean by a reverse question. So that has come up before. Students have lost a lot of marks on that because they didn't answer it properly. So read the question. When are they in breach? When would they be in breach of the Sale and Goods and Supplies Services Act? Will be if goods are not of merchantable quality. So literally all you're doing is adding in an extra word there. They're not of merchantable quality. Okay, so that's another little tip there on that one. Now, the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC. Okay, so make sure you know that I've given you a sample answer on that, and I've also evaluated it. Again, when you're learning this section, always just pick out the keywords. Okay, don't try and learn big chunks of information, because if you try and learn big chunks of information, you're really going to struggle to take everything in. Okay, so make sure that you just learn your keywords, and once you've learned your keywords, then put it into a sentence. Okay, the next thing that we have here is the small claims court. Okay, you're often asked to evaluate this. Okay, it's a quick and cheap method. All right, will be one of the subheadings that you could use there on that. Evaluate the small claims court would possibly just come up as a 10, maybe a 15-mark question. It won't feature as a 20-mark question. Okay. The Ombudsman. So the last time the Ombudsman came up, it was the Ombudsman for Public Services. So again, I've given you notes there in that. So that will be our government bodies, our HSC. If somebody has a problem with any of the above, then they can go to the Ombudsman. So it will ask you for, what are the functions of the Ombudsman. So have a look down through the notes there. And I've given you some quite good notes on that section, because it's something that does feature. The students don't tend to answer it very well. So let's have a look at our questions that we have on here in this then. The Office of the Ombudsman of Public Services, that's the one we just spoke there, came up in 2010. Small Claims Court, again, came up last year. Illustrate, evaluate, explain, describe any of the 2 acts. You may be asked to do all of those. Okay, so it is something that could feature. Okay, so evaluate the Director of Consumer Affairs, National Consumer Agency. So that's what it used to be called, and now it's the CCPC. So we can see it's 2016 that came up last, and it hasn't come up since it changed to the CCPC. So I will be putting a star beside that one, and I will be focusing on that, and I will be able to evaluate it. So again, have a look at the sample answer that I gave you on that. Remedies for consumers for breach of the Act. Okay, so what are the remedies? It's generally our 3 R's. Okay, a refund, replacement, repair. Okay, so have a look at what the remedies are of that, and then illustrate where retailers will be in breach of the 2 acts. And that's what I spoke about there in terms of a reverse question. Okay, so go down through those and make sure that you're able to answer all of them. Okay, so that's our section then on consumer law. Again, as I said, if you need to take a break there, guys, just pause it and go back over it and have a listen, or if you need to take a break for a few minutes. So the next section then that we'll just move on to is our industrial relations conflict. Now, this is a topic that students tend to find quite difficult because there's lots of acts in it. I tend to do this at the start of 5th year, and I suppose a bit of a baptism of fire when they come into 5th year from junior cert business. It's a bit of a step up. But what I would just say is go through this checklist that I've got here. If you can answer everything that's on this, then you'll be fine. What I suggest to students to do is I get them to write out some notes, kind of like on a mind map thing, and I get them to stick it up in their either in their bedroom or over their study desk or something like that. And every time they sit down, they're seeing it. So the more times you see this chapter or this topic, the easier you will find it. So if you're sitting down every day and you're looking up at the different types of acts, it will sink in. Okay, so it's just one of those tips, and it's probably one of the more difficult topics on the syllabus, which students have found, what I've found over the years. So that's just a little kind of a tip in terms of trying to get it soak in. It's probably a topic that you'll have to go over numerous times as well. Okay, so our industrial relations conflicts then. It has come up every year except 2005. So you can be pretty much guaranteed that there will be something on this chapter. Okay. And what I've said here is the Labour Court hasn't come up since 2008. So I will be saying, that is a really good chance of that coming up. And I've got a sample answer here that I'm going to show you in a minute, just to kind of give you an example of just learning your keywords and how to evaluate. So if we look at industrial relations, okay, be able to define what industrial relations is. And again, your keyword there is your relationship. Okay, relationships between your employer and your employee. Okay, you talk about the types of communication. Is a good communication between the employers and employee. The causes of conflict. Okay, pay and conditions generally tend to be one of the main reasons or the causes of conflict. Okay, and then explain the importance of good industrial relations. Okay, so what is it? Increases employee motivation. You could probably give 20 of them there on that. That's a very easy one to give, but make sure that you can do that. Okay, increase their sales and profits. So be careful on that question there, though. The question might say, explain the importance of good industrial relations to the employee, or it may say, explain the importance of good industrial relations to a business. So both of them are very different. So what some students might do is they'll say, oh, the importance of good industrial relations. They'll stop reading there and they'll start writing out their subheadings. They forget to read the end. So what is the importance? Is it to the business or is it to the employee? Because they're very two different answers. So make sure that you can answer those two. Next one, we have pay claims and types of industrial action. Okay, so a relativity pay claim, comparability pay claim. Okay, so then are different types of industrial action then. Okay, so make sure you have a look at the notes that I've given you there on that. Okay, it often kind of comes up maybe as a, 10 mark question, 15 mark question. Okay, so make sure you can answer that. So again, similar to the consumer conflict, we're going to look at the non-legislative methods of solving it. So we have negotiation. I'm going to come back to trade unions in a minute. We have negotiations, conciliation, and arbitration. Okay, so we have those three methods here. Okay, now make sure you can evaluate each one of those, because I think the last time conciliation and arbitration came up, they look for it to be evaluated. Okay, so negotiation would be, that's pretty self-explanatory. They come together, they talk, try and solve their problems. You might say that the employee might have another representative with them. It could be a trade union representative. It could be just another member of staff representing them as well, or being present with them. Now, conciliation and arbitration, and this is the one that students tend to kind of you get mixed up on, or which one is which. So conciliation, arbitration members, they have to agree to the outcome before they go into the meeting. So they're agreeing to whatever the arbitrator's decision is, that they will agree to that. And the way I help the students learn it is like A for agree, A for arbitration. Okay, so just simple little things like that should help you pick up and help you learn it a little bit easier, and also be able to evaluate those as well. Because as I said, that's the way it came up previously. So trade unions then, for our trade unions, you need to be able to give the functions of the trade union, okay, and explain the role of the ICTU, okay? So remember, our trade unions then will be, they protect our employees, okay, they provide them with information, so they provide publicity for them. So they're all our subheadings that we need to use those. So be able to write out, so if you got a question, the functions of a trade union, be able to write out your subheading, your explanation, and so on, or the role of the ICTU, okay? So if it comes up as the functions or the benefits, you can use the same subheadings for both of those. So what are the benefits? What are the functions? You can use the same, okay? So that would be our non-legislated methods of resolving industrial conflict. Next one then we need to look at is our legislative method. So the first act we're going to look at is the Industrial Relations Act, okay? So Industrial Relations Act 1990. Again, it's really, really important that you learn your dates here on this. Okay, so the first thing that it does is it defines what a trade dispute is. So a trade dispute then, okay, learn a proper definition of that. Okay, so disagreement, you could say there about the conditions of the work or the conditions of employment. Okay, you can talk about the employment or the non-employment of your employees. All right, so learn a good definition there for that. The next one we have is a secret ballot. Okay, so you should all be able to talk about your secret ballot with primary picketing, secondary picketing. Okay, be able to explain both of those. Next one then we have is the WRC. Okay, now this has replaced your LRC. All right, your Workplace Relations Commission. All right, so be able to explain your functions on those, and I've given you notes on that. So that topic has changed. So it hasn't, make sure you know the WRC as opposed to the LRC. I'm sure the majority of books or the notes that your teachers are using will have changed it to the WRC at this stage. Okay, now the next one is our Labour Court and the functions of our Labour Court. And I'm going to show you our functions of the Labour Court here. So if you can see, what I have here is learn your keywords, and I have your keywords in red. Okay, so we evaluate, we give our subheading, so investigates industrial disputes. Okay, all the words you need to learn there in this could not be solved by the WRC, issues a recommendation is not legally binding. Okay. And again, free and expert service. So if I was you learning it, I'd learn the word investigates. Okay. And I know that it's industrial disputes, could not be solved by the WRC, issue recommendation, not legally binding, free and expert service. They're the only words that I'm learning. Put it into a sentence. Because if you're going to try and learn everything here, you're going to find it very, very difficult. Okay. The next one then that we have down on it will be here's appeals against decisions previously made about the adjudication officer in discrimination case. So you must put in, like if I'm correcting and I see discrimination case on the Employment Equality Act or sacking on the Unfair Dismissal Act, I'm underlining that straight away. I might not be reading everything that's in there other than that, but I'm underlining those keywords. Okay, the courts listen to the evidence, and if I see legally binding judgment, that's underlined there. Okay, so I'm underlining everything that you're getting your marks for. So again, if that's been marked 2 plus 2 plus 1, I'm picking your 2 up here, straight away I see those keywords 2. Okay, and then in my opinion, this is good because the issue was resolved once and for all. Okay, so there, that's your evaluation there. That picks up your plus 1. Okay, so we're getting our 2 plus 2 plus 1. So have a look over this sample answer that I've given you on it, because I give you your subheadings, give you your explanation, and I give you your evaluation. So if it did, like, it might only come up, explain the functions of a labour court, but at least it's good for you to have your evaluation. As I said, it's students tend to find the evaluations quite difficult. So this one, if you find it hard to evaluate yourself, just pick out the keywords there and learn those. So let's jump back then to our presentation. So that's our labour court and our functions, and then the different types of industrial action. So I've given you notes there on that as well, okay? So the next one we have is our Unfair Dismissal Act, 1977 to 93. Now, all of these dates are probably hard for you to learn. So that's why I said stick them somewhere where you'll see them from now until you sit your leaving cert, okay? Or even write them on little cards. So the morning of your exam, you're kind of flicking through them and you're having a look at those dates. Okay, so Unfair Dismissals Act then, 1977 to 93. So reasons for fair and unfair dismissal. So the reasons, like for unfair dismissals, a lot of you would probably be, race, religion, pregnancy, all of those. You should all be able to give those straight. The ones that kind of catch people and the ones that will be asked more often is the reasons for fair dismissal. So make sure you know those. Okay, what are the fair dismissals? So you can say incompetency, qualifications, misconduct. They're all your reasons for fair dismissal, and be able to give an answer on those. Okay, what to do if dismissed unfairly? Okay, so where do you do, or where do you go if you're dismissed unfairly? Okay, so you go to your adjudication officer in the WRC. All right, and you must put in there as well that it's the employer has to prove that that the dismissal was fair. Okay, so the burden of proof is on the employer. They have to prove that the dismissal was fair, and they have to show that they have followed the procedures. So if we're looking at procedures here, procedures an employee should follow before dismissing an employee. Okay, so I've given you a sample answer on that there. Okay, so have a look over that sample answer. All right, and then redress for unfair dismissal. Okay, depending on what the case is, will depend on what the redress will be. Okay, so again, be able to have a look at those. And then our last topic there, and that is constructive dismissal. And this also, they also like to ask this one. Okay, so the difference between the constructive dismissal, okay, is that the employee leaves the job because their boss has made their life unbearable and they feel that they have to leave. Okay, but the burden of proof is on the employee to prove this. Okay, in other cases, the burden of proof is on the employer. In this case, it's on the employee. Okay, so that's our constructive dismissal. And the next one we look at then is the Employment Equality Act. Now, in terms of act, this is the one that hasn't featured regularly. Okay, so the Employment Equality Act, the other acts have featured more recently. Okay, so I would make sure that you know this one. Discrimination, be able to define what discrimination is, define it, and be able to give the 9 grounds of discrimination. Now, it has come up previously where the question was a really nice question, and it just asked list the 9 grounds, or I don't even think they asked for the 9. I think it was list, the grounds of discrimination. So that would have been a really nice question. All right, what are the provisions set down by the Act? So it talks about, employing employees, talks about advertising, employment pay and promotion. So make sure you know all of those provisions set down by that Act. And again, we look at the investigation procedure. Okay, we take it to our adjudication officer again in the WRC, okay, and have a look down through all of that. And again, what are our remedies? So they're the 3 acts that we need to look at. They're the topics that you need to know. So as I said, go down through each one of them, be able to tick them off. Okay, can I give a definition of discrimination? Can I give the 9 grounds by provision set down by the Act? Okay, so have a look over all of that and make sure you can define each one of those and answer them. And it's a case of like, close the book, test yourself. And I've said this to you before, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to write everything out nice and neatly. Okay, scribble it out, fill in your half the words and then be able to correct it yourself. Okay, so let's have a look then. Finally, we have a look at the possible questions on this. So, Small Claims Court, Labour Relations Commission, which now will be the WRC, okay, and the Employment Appeal Tribunal, which now they've taken this totally off your syllabus. So we only have these 2 that have come up. On the Fair Dismissal Act, okay, we can see that came up in 2016, non-legislative methods of solving conflict. So if that's the case there on that one, then we're going to look at so what we're going to look at, non-legislative methods of solving conflict, will be your negotiation, your conciliation, your arbitration. Trade union, the impact came up in 2010. Discrimination, see, hasn't come up since 2015. The Director of Quality Investigations, which the name has changed now. And then we have our Labour Court, hasn't come up since 2008. So that's something that we need to look at as well. Okay. Define a legitimate trade dispute. We can see that they like to bring up this. This has come up quite a bit. Okay, the define a legitimate trade dispute are the reasons for and the types that can be undertaken. So make sure you know those. The role of the LRC, which is now your WRC, okay, that has come up previously, so it is something that would feature. Okay, unfair dismissals, grounds deemed to be fair and unfair came up in 2018. Okay, so you should have picked up quite a bit there on that section, guys. I hope that you've learned a little bit. As I said, pause it as you go through, go back over it, and use this just to tick it off in terms of revision. Next lecture, we'll be looking at our Unit 2, okay, and we'll be using the same format that we have there. Okay, guys, thanks for joining me today. Happy learning. Bye.